We're going to do our top 20 running back rankings today a little bit differently. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to run through my top 20 running back rankings, but I'm also going to juxtapose them compared to the expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros today. So first, go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So at number one, we're all consensus here. Doesn't matter where you go, Christian McCaffrey's number one, and literally the only thing that could screw this up for Christian McCaffrey is if he gets a bad injury and he misses a good part of the season. At number 2 and 3, I've got Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall. Now these guys are flipped in the expert consensus rankings over on Fantasy Pros. They've got Breece as the RB2 consensus and Bijan as the RB3. So my rationale for this has been very clear all offseason, and I'll make it clear again today. Bijan Robinson, I believe, is going to take that leap this year, and I don't think it's going to be behind Breece Hall. I love Breece Hall, but all we've heard this offseason in regards to Atlanta Falcons and the Bijan Robinson camp is that Raheem Morris, new head coach over there, is so in on the idea of using him all the time. He's going to use Bijan Robinson ad nauseum in this particular offense here. So I don't really have any concerns about volume of Bijan. And I think we all understand that Bijan, if he gets volume, has the talent that Breece Hall does. And it's, again, I think Breece Hall, you could make the argument, could be number 2, and I would listen to it. I'm not going to do that, though, because I just believe Breece Hall has so much working against him. Yes, they should be better if Aaron Rodgers is fully healthy, and I don't really think that his targets per game that you see on the screen are going to go down much with Aaron Rodgers. 40-year-old dude coming off an Achilles tear, he'll probably check the ball down quite a bit. There's just a lot working against him that I don't think is going to be working against Bijan this year without Arthur Smith. So I've got Bijan at number 2 and Breece at number 3. And let me know where you have these guys ranked. At number 4 and 5, I've got Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor. Again, these guys, they've got Jonathan Taylor at number 4 on Fantasy Pros. And they've got Jahmyr Gibbs at number 6 as the RB6. So here's what I think about Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor in particular, I think is going to have a great season. I think that he's certain to produce very well in fantasy as long as he stays healthy for an entire season, because he's got the addition of a running quarterback now who's going to absolutely help with Jonathan Taylor's efficiency numbers. And if you look at the screen, his targets per game were not a major reason why he was scoring a bunch of points. And that was mostly without Anthony Richardson. So if his targets per game drop to like 1 target a game, it's not really going to affect his fantasy performance much and his fantasy output, because he doesn't see a lot of his production through the targets. So I just think all it's going to do is be a net positive, because it's going to increase his overall efficiency numbers and just how many touchdowns he'll probably run in as well. And then with Jahmyr Gibbs, I think the reason I've got him above Jonathan Taylor is simply because I think the offense is perfect for him. I like the age more, obviously, with Jahmyr Gibbs. I think if you apply what he did in the back half of the season to a full season, which I expect he will get that workload full season this time, I think he's clearly a top 5 guy. I can understand the argument of flipping these guys right here, but I'm going Gibbs just based on the offense that he's in and the age that he's at. I think he's got an advantage of both of those over Jonathan Taylor. At 6 and 7, I've got Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley. Josh Jacobs, I've got him ranked well above expert consensus right here. So we'll go into that. He's the RB11 on Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings. My rationale for this, Josh Jacobs, I can understand why he's lower in the rankings, right? You look at his 2023 season on the screen, it wasn't a good statistic season for him. He was inefficient, he didn't find the end zone much, and he also missed lots of the back, quarter of the season due to injury. So it's like, at an age, at a year older in age, why are we just assuming he's going to come back good? Totally understand that argument for me. For me, here's what it is with Josh Jacobs, though. Josh Jacobs comes into an offense where Green Bay paid him good money to be their running back 1. There's no question it's not going to be A.J. Dillon. It's not going to be Marshawn Lloyd. I think I think Lloyd will probably get some touches, but I think Jacobs is the workhorse here. And him being a workhorse in Green Bay is so much better than him being a workhorse in Vegas, because they have a better offensive line. They have a better quarterback. They have better weapons around him, more deep. There's more depth in this offense than there was in Las Vegas. So I think the pressure is off Josh Jacobs, and I actually think that they're going to run it with him quite a bit in the end zone. With Saquon Barkley, I've been very vocal about my concerns with him. I think he's ranked too high basically everywhere. And it's not like I'm super different on this one. They have him as the RB5. I just have him 2 spots lower. I've been very vocal about this. Saquon Barkley coming into the season at 27 years old. 2 out of the last 3 seasons, efficiency below 4 yards per carry. Is that because he was running bad offensive line in New York? Yeah, probably was. Is it also because they had bad offense around him? Probably was. Obviously, both of those 2 things get better with Philadelphia. But the one thing I cannot get out of my mind, and I think everybody needs to take into consideration, is that Saquon Barkley is on an offense where Jalen Hurts is going to be running the tush push a ton at the goal line. So his touchdown numbers are probably not going to be as high as a lot of people are predicting that they will be. And they don't run the tush push because they have a lack of creativity offensively. No, they run it because they have a 92.5% hit rate when they run that. That's the reason they do it, so you better believe they're going to continue to do it again. Derrick Henry at number 8, I've got him exactly on board, right on line with expert consensus rankings. They have him at 8 as well. I think Derrick Henry is in a very similar situation to Saquon, but I think the difference here is that I don't think Saquon is going to... I think Saquon will see more volume than Henry does. I think Henry will probably be less volume but more efficient and probably with more touchdowns. But I think the volume is going to be on Saquon's side here. And so Derrick Henry is going to sit comfortably here at number 8 behind Saquon. But I can honestly even see the argument of trying to put Saquon behind Derrick Henry. 9 and 10. Devon Achane moves past Kyren Williams for me as accordance to my last rankings. I had Kyren at 9 and Achane at 10. And Achane is the RB12 expert consensus rankings. So I am bigger on Achane than ECR is, apparently. I don't really understand why either. Like, I have made it public my concerns with Devon Achane. Devon Achane is small. He's a small guy, and he was injured for a good part of half of the season because of injuries. Why? Because he's just a smaller guy who can't handle as big of a workload. Obviously, the efficiency numbers, they speak for themselves, and I think we all understand that he's unlikely to be able to maintain those efficiency numbers. Just very unlikely. I think with Devon Achane for me is that he's going to see more volume, and what I continue to read about him is that he looks bigger. He's put on weight. He's put on muscle over the offseason. That's a big deal, because if he can get 5 to 10 pounds heavier and still be as fast as he was, that'll help his durability theoretically, and I think that's the missing piece here. So I think he'll probably take over the duties in Miami, while Raheem Mostert I still believe will be involved, or there will be 2 running back system, whether it's Mostert or whether it's Jalen Wright. I think he'll be the lead back though. And then with Kyren Williams, expert consensus has him ranked as the RB7. I think for me with Kyren Williams, I just keep getting scared by him. I'm not going to lie about this one. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say I have something. Like, I'm not saying that I have knowledge that everybody else doesn't. I'm just getting a little more scared about it. Blake Corum, all I'm hearing is hype around Blake Corum's name. Everybody's saying he looks fantastic in practice, yada, yada, yada. Of course, we're in June, and practice means nothing right now. There's a lot of practice warriors every year around this time of year that end up doing nothing in fantasy. So I'm not saying that I think Blake Corum is going to be the number 1 guy. If I thought he was, Kyren wouldn't be at RB10. I think that what scares me is that we have a history with Sean McVay surprising us with running back production. We have a history with it. So I just get uneasy with this one. I've taken Kyren quite a bit in underdog. Probably will still continue to take him, but I do have concerns with Kyren Williams. 11 and 12, I've got Rachaad White and James Cook. Now, both of these guys, I have a big difference in opinion, I think, than expert consensus rankings, because Rachaad White is the RB15 in expert consensus rankings, and James Cook is the RB16 in expert consensus rankings. Rachaad White is so interesting because it's like I've doubted Rachaad White for years now in fantasy football. Efficiency has always been bad with Rachaad White. Now, of course, what propelled him into a top 10 running back type of player in 2023 was that he was getting tons of volume. And he also had Dave Canales, who really wanted him to get the volume. Now, what I want to hone in on is this. If you look at Rachaad White's production that he produced in weeks 1 through 9 versus weeks 10 through 18, everything went up as far as his volume goes and his efficiency went. And this is research that I did in a video a couple weeks ago about finding unsuspecting league-winning running backs in 2024. And I think that Rachaad White could possibly be that guy just because he did produce better in the back half of the season last year. So without David Canales is a concern, but I still do think the volume is going to be there because they have no clear guy who's challenging him for touches. And then with James Cook at 12, I honestly don't get this one. I really don't understand like why his expert consensus ranking is that low. Look, with James Cook, very similar story to with Rachaad White, where everything got better for James Cook the back half of the season. And the big change was that Ken Dorsey was fired as the offensive coordinator after they lost to the Broncos in embarrassing fashion, and then they switched to Joe Brady as their play caller. James Cook became the focal point of the offense. So I don't see a world where we don't see the back half of last year's production applied to 2024 for the duration of the season. And so I might even have it too low. I don't understand the RB16 ranking though. There's no way he's not an RB1 in fantasy this year. Isaiah Pacheco and Travis Etienne at 13 and 14. Now with Pacheco, I've got him 3 spots lower, and Travis Etienne, I've got him 5 spots lower than expert consensus rankings. And both these guys is funny. I drafted both of them a ton last year, and I stand by it because they did very well in fantasy last year, and I don't have issues with either one of them. I have more with Travis Etienne. I'll get into that in a minute. Isaiah Pacheco, I think, is going to be good. I think Isaiah Pacheco is just... There's not really a clear indication that anything's really building for the run game, in my opinion, because it's like, yeah, there's not running back competition added, but at the same time, like, there really hasn't been much competition over the past 2 years for Isaiah Pacheco. So I don't see that being an advantage in 2024 than it was in 2023. And also, the offensive line is still, like, as good as it was. It's still very good. And he's just not, like, getting a ton of touchdowns on a yearly basis because Kansas City's offense is more efficient and ingenuitive towards the goal line. So Isaiah Pacheco, I don't see being, like, a Derrick Henry type of guy in the red zone where he's going to get like 10 touchdowns rushing this year. And then with Etienne, I have more concerns. Etienne, I really do have concerns with this guy. Kind of hitting a cliff. Travis Etienne, you look at the back half of last year, and it was not very good. Like, he was doing so freaking well the first half of the year that he was able to hold a running back 3 finish when it all was said and done in 2023. But if you just look at the back half of the season, inefficient on the volume that he was getting. And that's no surprise because Jacksonville and Doug Peterson have said publicly this offseason, yeah, we want to limit his touches a little bit more in 2024. So they saw those numbers and they saw his performance and they said, yeah, he's probably best with like a complimentary back. So they're probably banking that Tank Bigsby is going to be that guy this year. I'm not a big Tank Bigsby guy. I don't really trust him to do that, but I do think there will be more emphasis trying to keep Travis Etienne fresh. So he may see efficiency increase, but I don't think his volume will be the same. That's going to drop him in fantasy this year. 15 and 16, David Montgomery and Kenneth Walker. So David Montgomery stays put. I've had him here for a while. His expert consensus ranking is 17. I really don't think I need to talk much about Dave Montgomery. I think that Detroit has shown clearly that they can produce 2 very good, efficient running backs in fantasy football. Jahmyr Gibbs gets a lot of targets, still gets carries, but he gets a lot of targets that separates him. What separates Dave Montgomery is that Dave Montgomery gets the red zone work, and that's why he had 10+ touchdowns last year, and that's also why Detroit, with Ben Johnson as their offensive coordinator, has now had 2 running backs with more than 10 touchdowns rushing in fantasy football. Dave Montgomery's going to be that guy again. Kenneth Walker, I've got him 3 spots below expert consensus, and I think it's just because of Zach Charbonnet. He's higher than he was last time I did these rankings because I put him over a couple of veterans, but Kenneth Walker, I do have concerns with just because of Zach Charbonnet. They didn't spend a 5th rounder on Zach Charbonnet. They spent a 2nd rounder on Zach Charbonnet. So he's not going to just ride the pine all year while Kenneth Walker does his thing. He didn't even do that last year. Kenneth Walker relinquished touches to Zach Charbonnet. And I think that Kenneth Walker is a great fantasy player. I think that he's efficient. I think he's a great real-life running back. But I just think that his ceiling is a little bit capped with Zach Charbonnet. 17 and 18. Alvin Kamara and Joe Mixon here. Now, the 2 veteran guys, they've kind of been in the same area all offseason for me, but they've kind of just like been shuffling around a little bit. Kamara, I've got him 2 spots over consensus. I think that Alvin Kamara, the big news right now with him is that obviously there's reports coming out that he was not at OTAs, he's not at the minicamp, and he might hold out in training camp because he wants new money. Now, the problem with that is the dude's like almost 30 years old at the running back position, and the Saints apparently do not want to pay him more money. So there could be a rift here, but if he plays, there's just no question. Like, if you, depending on how you feel about Olave, Alvin Kamara, you could easily make the case as their best option. He was still really good last year on the work that he gave. Look at the numbers. They speak for themselves. He was producing RB1 type of numbers, and if he didn't miss a significant portion of the first half of the season, he would have been a top 12 running back in all likelihood. Joe Mixon at 18, I've got him 4 spots lower than expert consensus. They have met RB14. I think with Joe Mixon, the problem that I have with him is that, number one, I see Houston's apparently trying to be a running back by committee team. I'm more of the mindset of like, yeah, we'll see how that goes come September. I don't think they're actually going to stick with that because Dameon Pierce proved that he's just not very good last year. Joe Mixon, I think the problem with him is that he's in a situation similar to Cincinnati. And it's like, yes, Cincinnati, like he was a top 5 running back there last year. But another year older, I don't see him being, like, he wasn't exactly like the most efficient guy last year. It wasn't bad, but I don't see him getting better. I only see him getting worse from here on out. So he's with basically almost an identical type of offense where they're going to throw the ball first and they're going to work the run off the throw. So if in any case they use a running back by committee and he loses touches, Joe Mixon probably is going to be a middle end RB2, but I might have him ranked a little bit too low. Let me know what you think of my ranking of Joe Mixon. Rounding it out at 19 and 20, I've got Tony Pollard at 19 and Raheem Mostert lands at 20. Now with Tony Pollard, I've got him 7 spots higher than expert consensus rankings. It's actually a little bit shocking to me because I think Tony Pollard, it's shocking and it's not. The reason it's not shocking is because I've said this all offseason. I honestly do believe Tennessee's offense is a major sleeper to get fantasy football players in. Calvin Ridley, I think, is a decent pick this year. He's affordable. Tony Pollard, I think, is a pretty good pick. Tajay Spears, I think, is a good pick. Will Levis, I think, is a great pick in underdog drafts today. I think you should draft all those guys on underdog. Use the code FFN to get a 100% deposit match and $250 in extra bonus cash if it's your first time depositing. Now, with Tony Pollard, I think that the thing is, in this offense with now Brian Callahan, who was offensive coordinator for Cincinnati several years ago, they're just experiencing a shift of their team to more of an offensive forward culture. And I think that with Tajay Spears, it actually benefits Tony Pollard because with Zeke all those years, he was more efficient and a better fantasy option when he was sharing the ball. So I think that with Tajay Spears, gonna take some pressure off him. I think that if the offensive line can take a step forward, which they should, because they did make improvements, this is gonna be a top 20 guy this year. And then Raheem Mostert honestly just keeps falling every time I rank. I've taken him a decent amount in underdog drafts. Probably will still take him a couple times. It's not that I don't like Mostert, I just don't trust it. I don't. I think last year was such an outlier year. Just dating back to history of fantasy football, he was the only running back above the age of 30 who broke out in the last 10 years in a top 3 running back status. So it's just hard to see it happening again with Raheem Mostert going to that level of greatness. And like I said earlier, I think Devon Achane takes the majority. So what I think we'll see Raheem Mostert get is like 10 touches a game. And if he can stay healthy, he'll be efficient. And I think he'll be a top 20 guy. But I just don't see them having him as the focal point of their offense this year. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and who your guy is in 2024 fantasy football.